We have most people in, so let's get started. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining the weekly ISR and CPAS seminar on Resilient Pacific. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today. We have with us Malia Akutagawa, who is a Native Hawaiian rights and environmental law attorney. She's an associate professor with Hawaii inuiākea School of Hawaiian Knowledge, Kamakakūokalani Center for Hawaiian Studies, and the William S. Richardson School of Law, Huli Ao Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law. Malia is part of the Hui Āina Momona cluster, which is a consortium of scholars throughout the university community charged with addressing compelling issues of Indigenous Hawaiian knowledge and practices. And she is going to be talking with us today about some of her work on Molokai. So I'll pass it over to you, Malia. Looking forward to your presentation.
Oh, mahalo nui, makena. And so I'm gonna share my screen here so you guys can see my presentation. So it's titled Hoʻokuʻikahi Aloha Molokaʻi, which is a hui of different volunteers, organizations that came together to respond to COVID. So I would kind of want to orient you in the work that we started more than 10 years ago as we were looking at food sovereignty and sustainability overall for our island. So,
sorry to interrupt, Malia. Is there a way to put it in a full screen? People will see it better.
Okay, let me try.
And actually, while you do that, I forgot to remind everybody that this session is being recorded and will be available to stream later on the CPAS YouTube channel as well as the ISR website. Oh, there we go. That's perfect.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, no worries. So I want to kind of give you this concept of the MOKULANA, the floating islands of abundance. And it's something that Senator Kalani English presented at a conference in 2017 to invoke this imagery. And this was with the Seasteading Institute as they're trying to respond to climate change in the Pacific and creating these so-called like floating islands. But what Senator English explained was this is well known within our own mo'olelo, our own stories throughout Polynesia of these floating islands in the clouds. And they typically appear at twilight above the horizon. And they're known to our people as islands of abundance, peace, and equality, where the gods and the people walk together. This concept became sort of known to me when I had this dream. And I was reminded of our creation chant of Molokai, where I'm from. And basically, the chant says, Loa'a Molokai he akua he kahuna, he pualena no nu'umea. Born is Molokai, a god, a priest, the first morning light from Nu'umea. And in this dream I had in 2008, I saw Molokai floating in the sky amidst the clouds. And it was this very silvery, very beautiful image of Molokai. And that was the Molokai we were yearning for, that legacy that we have in our ancient name, ʻaina Momona, as the fat land. And so I conveyed this vision to to an artist, and she drew it for me. And basically, what you see is Hina, the goddess and mother of Molokai, and enfolding our island in an embrace. And there's these, you see this, it's kind of like, you know, when you see a reflection of the land on a clear surface, a mirror glass-like surface of water, and you know that the reality is the land and not the vision on the surface of the water. What happened was, this was inverse for me, and it's almost like a photo negative, where the negative is the reality, and then when you make it into a photographic image, that is the copy. So what I realized was, as a people, we were yearning to bring heaven upon earth and to bring this Momona back to our island. So that's why the manini fish and the kalo, you see white and then you see black. So it's the negative and the positive. And then below there's the upena, you know, gathering that abundance. And then there's manifestations of Hina in the plant and in the moon phases. And then the poʻo represents Haloa, and this sort of, you know, coming together peacefully to bring about pathways to sustainability. So in 2009, we did a conference, and we were just a bunch of guys with a pipe dream. We had a common vision, and, you know, everybody was talking about sustainability, and there was a concern that all of these initiatives would pass Molokai by. So we created our own conference, and our keynote speaker was Nainoa Thompson. And he said these really inspiring words to us that stayed with us. He said, "We need Molokai in Hawaii. We need you to succeed at what you're contemplating today, because I really believe that we are in an enormous crisis, both here locally and on the earth. We are in trouble. When you talk about vision, you have to have it, because if you don't, somebody else will. I would like to talk about crisis and the issue of whether we get up and find success or we don't. The leadership that we need has to have these kinds of renewed qualities: courage, vision, commitment to the whole thing, and understanding the power of being unified." And so he talked about his father who guided him. And he said, you need to understand the power of vision. You need to see your destination. The main thing you need to know is who you serve. Know your vision, know your values, share it, articulate it. They will come. Define your community by those who believe in you and your values, who come for the purpose to work, to learn, to grow, and to share. Do not compromise planning. Figure out every single step that you need to do to make sure that you are successful. And so we created this sustainability wheel. We called it sustainability because we wanted to ensure that at the center was Aina. And Aina is people and the land together. Like, you can't separate it. And so we looked at these kind of spokes on the wheel of areas that we would focus on that would create that sustainability. And so one of the areas we've been working on a lot is food sovereignty. And so we have a number of farmers, local farmers, Hawaiian homestead farmers that we buy from through this mobile market and food hub. So I've put in the chat some links to the Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi website that shows all our producers, what their farming philosophy is, what they grow. And so every week we have people go online and put in their order. And we have this EBT double bucks program, so that it's not just accessible to those who have, who are wealthy or, have good financial means, but it's also open to those who have EBT, and they basically pay 50% discount for all the produce that is, and value-added products that our producers provide. So when COVID hit, I'm the leader of the ʻAha Kiole, which is an indigenous governance system on Molokai. And we were very concerned about the cruise ship coming, American safari tours, and concerned about airplanes coming in. So we actually catalyzed this protest that ended up happening island-wide after we did it, to tell tourists, don't come here. We only have 7,000 people on the island, and if anyone got sick and with limited health services on our island, it would be catastrophic for us. So sure enough, there was two people actually at Friendly Market became diagnosed with COVID. And Friendly Market is our largest grocery store. And so they had to shut down for several weeks. And then it impacted all the other stores too. And we had to get the sanitation guys to come in and sanitize everything, all of our commercial establishments and our stores. And so it created a lot of hardship for the families. And so what happened was we had to work together as a community to figure out how we were going to respond to this. So I'm going to show you folks just our thought process and how we were able to coordinate. So can you guys see the mind map here? Okay, I hope you guys can. So, through our nonprofit Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi, our executive director organized all these meetings. And so we had to look at food issues. So this shows a mind map of like, where are we gonna get fish? There were, we had the Maui Food Bank providing once a month shipments. So our efforts were concentrated on how can we supplement that and feed our families. So we had certain board members on our board. For example, Matt Yamashita, he's a fisherman, so he outreached different fishermen, and they did target fish of ta'ape and akule. And then he identified the needs that the fishermen had to go and get this fish, and we got a number of funders to help us. And then, because they were doing a service for us, we didn't want them to have to get commercial fishing license. So we had one of our other board members check with the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We also did, community surveys of needs, and different providers provided those surveys and gathered that data. We had issues of, hunting. Where do we get venison? We on Molokai, we're a very rural island, and we have a lot of hunters, but for those who can't hunt, especially kupuna, and other families, we wanted to be able to provide food for them. So we inquired with the slaughterhouse. We couldn't get it to be USDA approved. So we decided to do custom cut, not for sale. And so the slaughterhouse arranged that if hunters want to bring in deer, they can process 12 to 30 deer per day. But in the end, what happened was hunters, they just took their own initiative, and they hunted and they gave to their neighbors. But we basically set up the structure by which we could mass distribute venison. And so through the ʻAha Kiole, also I have MOKU leaders, different district leaders. And so I identified these district leaders who also went to large landowners to ask for access for hunters to go on their land and hunt. And then through our mobile market, we had different farmers, and we wanted to be able to pay them. So there was all this kind of funding coming down for the COVID response. And we sourced out different farmers to get leafy greens, yams, sweet potato, banana, papaya, cucumbers. Also, we got Molokai, grass-fed beef from the slaughterhouse, as well as Molokai grown shrimp from our local shrimp farm. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that our people had access to healthy foods, because food bank mainly provides like canned goods and dry goods. And then we had to like coordinate the different food suppliers. So we found that at the time, the Grab and Go Department of Education, DOE Grab and Go program was only being implemented by the high school. And so the entire island, all the parents had to go twice a day to the high school, and they were running out of food. So we coordinated to get additional schools online. And then because gas costs like $5 a gallon, for some families or most families, it's not feasible to keep driving to pick up this food. So then families were not utilizing the grab and go. And so what we did was we got different organizations to deliver the food to different communities. And, you know, these families really needed to have breakfast and lunch for their kids because they relied on it when they were in school. And so a lot of guys were running out of their EBT by feeding their children, 3 square meals. So being able to ensure that the grab and go meals would continue and that we could expand it so that every district would have access to the meals for the kids. This was really important to coordinate who was gonna distribute these meals. And then we're also focusing on the kupuna. So we worked with different organizations to make sure that that was continued. And we also had to look at food storage, refrigeration space. So we had all these options, Molokai cooling plant, but the Mauna Loa General Store, our organization ended up taking on that store, which had shut down prior to COVID because the owners had retired. So they ended up, Molokai Ranch ended up asking us to reopen that store, and that's where we store all of our food for the food hub. We had Paddler's Inn, a restaurant, provide refrigeration for us. We also got a Matson container for chill, but we had to make sure that we weren't gonna be impacting the hospital because we were worried because we only have like one mortician and he can only handle 3 to 4 bodies. So we were worried like if this pandemic harm, basically if it resulted in a lot of casualties, we had to figure out how we could store, bodies and keep them refrigerated. So we wanted to make sure we wasn't going to interfere with that. And then we had like the Molokai Community Health Center. They waived their kitchen user fees so we could process taro, sweet potato, and other foods dedicated for the food bank. And then we increase, instead of once a month delivery, we did twice a month. And there's close to 1,000 families that rely on these food boxes. And you know, the reason why we did this was because the stores had shut down or provided limited service due to COVID. So we really had to galvanize. This was like in March, April, and incredibly stressful period. But we were able to coordinate these things. And then we got certain funders. Then we also looked at essential supplies. The police station was providing some of this. Our Auntie Jan's House of Blessings in Mauna. We had some of our ʻAha Kiole members making masks. So Kanoi Davis of Pomahina Design, she was making face masks for people. And Liliʻokalani Trust also got secured masks. And then we wanted to make sure we were doing outreach on educational outreach and social media. So we were working on, you know, there was this Molokai person, Tyler, who created a Molokai COVID Facebook page. So we all posted to that. We work with some people who are like health oriented to do demonstrations on La'au Lapa'au. Funders like Aloha Care, many funders provided us funding to do all this work. Even a filmmaker friend of mine who had done a film on Molokai, she wanted to do a free broadcast. So there were a lot of people volunteering and helping. And then, you know, the adult daycare program for Kupuna shut down because of COVID. So we did wellness checks, you know, we organized by MOKU and to do like yard cleaning chore services and wellness checks for our kupuna. Right now, we actually, one of our Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi staff, on his own time, he's creating this, he created like this hui to serve the digital needs of kupuna and create this mobile Wi-Fi hotspot. And basically, they're gonna train kupuna to utilize the computer because we're seeing that there is more of a need for that in COVID as everyone is in quarantine. And then I also utilize our leadership, you know, community volunteers to reach out to La'au Lapa'au Hawaiian medicinal practitioners. And so we talked about like organizing a Facebook Live, recording to our Molokai Media Center, just to broadcast ways that people can gather and prepare traditional medicines to deal with the symptoms of COVID, given that our health services are limited on Molokai. And then I contacted my colleague at Hawaiian Studies, Keoki Baklayan, who's an instructor in La'au Lapa'au. And I asked him if he could create like a series for La'au Lapa'au and share it with our Akaku Media Center so we could broadcast it throughout Molokai and Maui County. So what Keoki did was he worked through Native Hawaiian Student Services and did a webinar, which was recorded. So these kinds of things we worked on. And getting back to the PowerPoint here. So let me put it on presentation mode again. So on our webpage, we have the Hoʻokuʻikahi initiative and how people can help to contribute. And so these are some images of the work we've been doing with a lot of volunteers and distribution. And then one of our board members, Matt Yamashita, he did a video about our Molokai COVID response. And so I want to share that with you folks. It's about 11 minutes long, and then you can really get a picture of what we did.
COVID-19 is beginning to disrupt lives around the world.
China has reported a total of
more countries in Europe have confirmed cases. Most of
Hawaii has its first presumptive positive case of COVID-19, the coronavirus.
We
saw the virus spreading, we saw it coming, and we knew that it would eventually get here.
Of the 6 major Hawaiian islands, Molokai has the highest per capita population of Native Hawaiian residents. This small remote community is famous for its fierce opposition to overdevelopment. The island has retained a family-based lifestyle grounded in culture and tradition. But with only 3 primary grocery stores and 1 hospital, a COVID-19 outbreak would be disastrous for the island's 7,000 residents.
We're basically all family on the island, and losing even 1 person to the virus would be too much. We really needed to be proactive. The risk was people bringing the virus here.
Everybody gather over. Our goal is to protect ourselves by not allowing the virus to come into our island. Whenever there's a threat to Molokai, we always come together. And today, it's a threat not only to the island of Molokai, but to the people of Molokai.
The health department reports 10 new cases of COVID-19 in Hawaii.
Governor David Ige announcing a mandatory 2-week quarantine for all travelers. It comes as Hawaii residents are ordered to stay at home.
With a total shutdown of Hawaii's economy, many families on Molokai were immediately impacted.
It took a long time before anyone was able to get unemployment, before they got their stimulus check. And there was a great need for food because a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck.
The state announced its 2nd COVID-19 death today and the first case of the virus on Molokai.
The first case that Molokai experienced ended up being someone that worked at one of our main grocery stores. You know, being responsible, that particular grocery store immediately closed. The other stores also closed out of safety and protection of the community. When 2 of the 3 stores reopened, they had established very strict protocols.
They come out, take your order, you have a piece of paper, give it to them, give payment, they bring it back out, then you go home.
We had phone orders that we'd take 25 items, and then the people who stood outside could get 12 items, and we would shop for them. It was really difficult, but the people of Molokai really understood that this is what we gotta do to be safe.
It was a really rough time in that first 2 to 3 weeks.
Accessing groceries became more difficult when statewide food shortages led to a reduction in weekly barge shipments to Molokai. The situation exposed the island's dangerous reliance on imported food. Fortunately, for decades, Molokai residents have protected their abundant natural resources.
Our lifestyle on Molokai is very much grounded and rooted in the culture, in farming and fishing. We eat from the land, eat from the ocean.
It's made us here in Molokai realize that we can actually bypass the store and still survive. And there's been a lot of sharing. People who know how to get fish from the ocean, people who know how to get deer from the land, sharing with others who are planting.
When you live here, it's not about doing your own thing. There's very strong community service type kuleana. Kuleana being responsibility. We've always been that way. We've always take care of one another.
Nonprofits also stepped up. Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi, with its weekly mobile market, was able to help offset the impacts of the store closures by connecting customers with locally sourced food.
People were desperate for how can we get food. So we currently had our mobile market in operation. It already had an online sales platform. So we were able to pivot pretty quickly to switch to a drive-through model. And we saw our numbers double. We do have a somewhat limited supply of produce, but people were accessing, like our grass-fed beef and our shrimp and anything that we had frozen that was available.
Being on the front lines put Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi in a position to help coordinate a wider effort to help meet community needs.
The first thing we had to do was really start to try to bring people together. So I put out the call, put out a Zoom, just said anybody interested in, talking about how we can support our community and those in need right now.
55 families that go to Kilo.
We had over 20 agencies, organizations, individuals jump on the call.
So we can set up a traffic flow when needed.
We have amazing, passionate, caring individuals and organizations that quickly stepped up to identify where the needs were and to figure out together how to address those needs within a really short time.
Partnering island agencies formed a collaborative network. Their top priority became assisting the local food bank that was seeing a major increase in demand, but also a serious decrease in food supply.
Hoʻokuʻikahi, Aloha Molokai is the name of this group. And it basically means to unify in love for our island, Molokai.
Mask and gloves is required. We are blessed here on Molokai because this is what it's all about, helping one another.
Food bank usually brings in canned foods as well as chilled foods. What Sustʻāinable Molokai and this effort of Hoʻokuʻikahi Aloha Molokai was able to do was add to the food to the point where we could give 800 plus households cucumbers, kalo, papayas. They also brought in beef from Molokai, shrimp. We got fish that our local fishermen would provide.
Distributing locally sourced food not only helped feed the island, it also provided income for local food producers like farmers, ranchers, and fishermen.
I run a charter business here, but as of mid-March and the pandemic hit, I was literally out of business. And so I was looking for other venues to help my community. And because I know how to fish, I decided to go out and get fish and provide for the Molokai Food Bank.
The funding to buy the food came through rapid response emergency grant programs.
Writing grants and asking for money a lot of times it's a really long process. But during COVID-19, funders are reaching out saying, do you have any ideas to help serve your community? And if you do, we'll get you funds. Super appreciate them really trusting in us and stepping up to the plate to help serve our community.
Thank you.
Thanks to comprehensive testing and community-wide effort in keeping COVID-19 from spreading, Molokai only saw 2 cases in the spring. By early May, grocery stores fully reopened, but ongoing economic hardship means food bank distributions remain critical. Meanwhile, the long-term work to create more resilient local food systems continues.
So today we were doing our ulu tree giveaway, and with that we're able to get trees out to our community.
Thank you. You're welcome. So this is a Hawaiian variety, so it's going to grow really big. Awesome. I'm so happy that they created this for us to have something to grow, and not just any plant, like food and native food and things that we understand and we know how to use.
Our vision is to help people grow more of their own food. So we've been offering a series of farmer trainings that teaches people the basic gardening and farming skills.
Yeah. Lettuce, cabbages.
Did anybody notice anything about this particular plant?
We actually teach ag skills to help people become job ready for agriculture jobs, as well as teach sustainability and gardening.
So today we just got our chicks in. This is part of our chicken egg production workshops. Each participant is getting 25 chickens.
It's kind of ironic, actually. COVID was a blessing in disguise because as much as it's a hardship and it's a challenge through all of this, we see our earth healing, we see our ocean healing, we see our mountains healing, we see our people coming together, we see our families healing, and our communities being even more tight-knit. But ironically, I see this as a vision of going back to ʻAina Momona. Yeah, we were always known as Molokai ʻAina Momona, meaning Molokai of the fat lands or the abundant lands or the sweet lands. And the reason for that is because Molokai was known to just have an abundance of food.
So I think really the key to our ability to respond to COVID-19 has been just our community's willingness to come together, to learn from each other. But I really think that's going to be the key to going forward. We want to get to the point where whatever the next crisis is, not only are we okay, but we're thriving.
So, as I reflect on this, I go back to that time when we first had this vision of restoring our ʻAina Momona and creating this organization, Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi. And so when Nainoa, his parting words for us was, when you guys set the course, you are setting it for us. When you are successful, we will succeed. When you become powerful, we will be empowered. When you become intelligent and educated, teach us. I sense that the course you're taking is what you all believe is absolutely the one you gotta take, one you cannot let fail. And so I think for us as a community, we realized that we had to restore that ʻAina Momona, and we had to start now. Even though other people weren't really thinking about it at the time, we wanted to create our own movement. And because we had planned over 10 years ago, we were able to respond to this crisis. And even, the farmer programs we have, we actually got approval for that in 2019, and we're developing 50 new farmers. So I'm very proud of my community in that we had the foresight to do this. And so we wanted to be able to share these kind of best practices with all of you, because really it is about the power of community. And I just wanted to also let you know that there's an upcoming publication, Value of Hawaii 3, Huli Hia, The Turning. And there's multiple contributors to this book. And it's really exciting as these different authors are visioning and planning for our islands in the wake of COVID. And so with that, I just like to say mahalo for spending the time with me here today. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them.
Mahalo, Malia. That was really interesting and so inspiring. Actually, thank you for sharing the cover of Value of Hawaii 3. I contributed a chapter, but I've not seen the artwork for the cover, and it's really lovely. So that's great. I want to remind our audience that you can type in questions to the Q&A. So we will field questions from that. So don't type questions into the chat function. If you have comments from Malia, please, you can feel free to put them in the chat, but questions direct to the Q&A. And while we have a couple come in already, but while we're waiting for questions to come in, I wanted to ask, so in an earlier seminar, actually Tarcisius' seminar, he talked about a barter system that was kind of came about in Fiji called Barter for a Better Fiji. And I was wondering if anything similar to that has happened in Molokai in the wake of COVID.
I think we've always been doing it, to tell you the truth. It's just Hawaiian practice. So, always like my grandmother, we would always get on her porch somebody delivering fish and venison, and she was known as a limu person. So, a lot of people used to come and ask for limu. So those practices are still thriving today, you know, and part of, you know, all the deer hunters and fishermen coming together. They're not only just delivering for the food bank, they're doing it already in their community. Yeah.
So we have a comment from the Q&A that says, love the video, clear guidelines and best practices. Can we get access to it and send to the people in Palau who have no COVID cases yet, but need to get organized and prepare nonetheless, just in case?
Yeah, if you look at the top of the chat, I've put different links. So you can look at our website. The video link is on YouTube, so I've put that in the chat. So just save the chat. And I also have the PowerPoint on there if you guys want to look at that at your leisure.
Great. And a question that's come in is, how is the homeless situation, if any, there?
I think there has been an increase in homelessness. And maybe there are hidden homeless people because, you know, there's a lot of extended ohana. But I have in more recent years seen homeless around. But I think a lot of them are, even if some are homeless, they know how to fish and hunt. So it may not be as evident, I think, as you would see like here on Oahu. Yeah.
I have another question and follow up to what you said about the efforts to get, you know, people online for the variety of reasons. And I mean, you know, what we're doing right now, getting everybody online is so important to communication at the moment. And even in terms of like participating in, you know, governance and decision making, right? All of the public hearings have been moved online, or a lot of them, and things like neighborhood board meetings. I don't know, can you just talk a little bit more about that effort? What, you know, in what ways was it really successful? Were there any hurdles that people hit?
I think it's sort of, you know, we're kind of learning as we go. So, you know, one of our staff people, and he's also a co-author on our Molokai COVID story, Christopher O'Brien. He started as first like as a parent of a Punana Leo children. So he went and secured funding to increase, you know, digital access. But as he began to work with a hui of people, they realized like kupuna especially need access, online access. So like we have the mobile market, but you can't access it unless you can order it online, you know. So they actually received some funding to do that. And considering that to be also part of the Hoʻokuʻikahi Aloha Molokai initiative. But we're really at the we got some funding, we're at the planning phase. We're about to receive this automobile that will provide like mobile internet access, especially to some of the areas on Molokai where internet access is a bit spotty. So we're actually responding to it now in real time. So these efforts are still continuing. We kind of got the food part down, but now we're looking at other aspects like the digital needs. And then we're also looking at our invasive limu species. So there's a lot of like gorilla ogo, and it's taking out all our native edible limu. So we're actually now working on this major limu project to eradicate the gorilla ogo and use it like for fertilizer and other value-added products, and then looking at cultivating our edible native limu. So that's kind of in the beginning phases too. So we want to like inventory our resources, enhance them, and restore that ʻAina Momona. So we're looking at progressive, proactive things as well as, you know, responsive sort of measures. Yeah.
Awesome. About the fish pond system, are there plans to expand the fish pond systems, or, you know?
Yeah, we actually began restoration in the 90s. So I think there were like maybe 3 or 4 fish ponds that were restored. And there's a number of like cultural groups that are beginning to restore their area. So that's also an ongoing thing.
Great, let me go to the Q&A and see if there are any questions coming in. So just a reminder to the audience to please type in your questions to the Q&A. Just a comment that came into the chat: awesome video, love the work of Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi, so inspiring.
Oh, mahalo.
A question just came in. What are the major challenges you see for implementing a community and cultural resilience plan like Molokaʻi's in a place like Oahu?
I think really it's, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people here on Oahu, and when they see stuff we do on Molokai, they said, oh, we're just too big of an island. You guys are lucky to have a small community. And I just kind of, you know, I was talking to Tootie Baker, who did her dissertation, I believe, on Molokai and how we organize. And, you know, and I was kind of telling her, you know, this is what I'm hearing. It's just hard to get people together. You know, there's too much people on this island. And what she told me is, no, that's an excuse. It's just laziness. And I was kind of taken aback. But as I think on it, I think there is some wisdom in her words. Because when I look at how, you know, our Aloha ʻaina movement on Molokai, we have a lot of, you know, guys, you know, like Uncle Walter Reedy. They're just hammers, you know, and they began even before Kaho'olawe, Protect Kaho'olawe days. And I remember when there was this proposed project to develop La'au Point on the west end. And it was, you know, the Molokai Ranch was trying to sell us on this idea and say, we'll give you cultural land easements if you allow us to do this. But for us, the majority of the island said no. You know, what are you going to do in terms of water resources and things like that? Basically, they were going to take water that was allocated to the Hawaiian homestead farmers. And we just said, there's not enough water to apply to this dry, arid area. And there'll be no recharge. And there's sacred sites and endangered species. So Uncle Walter asked me to, you know, as an attorney, to do a presentation to the community on how do we fight this La'au Point development. And I said, they're going to come out with an environmental impact statement, and they're going to have all these different sections, and we're going to have to provide public comment and organize in this manner. You got to get them at the permitting phase, you know, and we it's in our consciousness, because George Helm, you know, of Molokai, he always said to us, do your homework. You know, you have no excuse, do your homework. And so on Molokai, there's, you know, they're not as highly educated as, you know, per capita as people on Oahu. Yet I remember there's 3 aunties, and I think they only had high school education. They taught themselves the Endangered Species Act, and they became the Endangered Species Act experts. And they basically provided, you know, testimony on what the impact would have been to monk seals, you know, and a certain endangered plants in the area. And there were 5,000 people that showed up to the public hearing out of 7,000. That means like the other 2,000 were like little kids and the elderly. But the whole population that could testify testified. And there was over 1,000 pages of testimony that nearly broke the fax machine for the Land Use Commission. And based on just that mega response by the community, the Land Use Commission was prepared to reject the environmental impact statement by Molokai Ranch. And the attorneys saw like how the tide was turning, and so they withdrew their proposal. So to me, with people on Oahu who are highly educated, it really is about just doing it, just organizing. And the ʻAha Kiole model is a good model. You know, there's a statewide ʻaha moku system, which says that each island can organize according to moku. And so these island councils can form to take care of our natural and cultural resources. And, you know, you just find who your experts are. You weave that expertise together and you begin to organize and mobilize as communities to address these issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember watching the kind of the testimony and just the mass turnout for the Ole, just sort of stopping that development. And I remember, I didn't realize you were sort of behind the mastermind of focusing on the EIS process. But I remember just being like, you know, as a planner, you know, being able to see through and like that moment where the community really gets a voice, right? Yeah. So we have one comment in the Q&A. What can we do to help efforts on Molokaʻi from afar? Like donate to a food bank or to Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi? Mahalo.
Yeah, I would say contact Sustʻāinable Molokaʻi because we've been sort of like one of the sort of the hub that releases funds to different organizations. So we have that capacity to umbrella a lot of this work that's occurring. So just go to that website and you can find the Molokai COVID response and who to call and contact.
Awesome. Well, we are almost to the hour, and I want to give a moment to see if there are any more questions come in the Q&A, but also to ask you, Malia, if there are any sort of last words you'd like to share with the audience.
There's something that Uncle Walter already said. Nobody's gonna come and save you. You gotta come together as a community and do it yourself. And you know, that is the essence of Molokai. Like we're MacGyvers, you know, we know nobody's gonna take care of us or care about us. You know, if something major happens, a lot of the efforts will be concentrated on Oahu. So we're just used to being resilient all the time. But what COVID has revealed is you know, there really is a lack of leadership on a government level. They don't know what they're doing. So it's really incumbent upon community to drive that response. So if there's anything I want to impart to you is, no scare them, go get them, go for broke. You know, our Sustʻāinable Molokai thing was a pipe dream amongst 7 people, and we was tired of seeing things bypass us, and we're waiting to, you know, we have to be the guys that do it. And so I'm extremely gratified to see how much we've grown in, you know, this last, I don't know, 12 years. So if you know, 7 guys with a pipe dream can achieve this, all you need is 7 crazy guys, 5 to 7 crazy guys just like you, and you can actually spark a movement.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question before time. How do you see continuing this momentum, right? You described in your presentation this sort of COVID being a catalyst for good in many ways, right? How do you keep that going even after things, you know, go back to normal, quote unquote?
I think this will be actually seared in the memories of people of how they were caught unprepared. And so this will really change people's mindset, I think. And for those who think that we can go back to how it was, you know, they're smoking something. They're not being realistic. So I think there's just more pioneers now, and there's more people like really thinking about this. And I think it's gonna really be that huli'ia, that turning, that change that's gonna happen. And we all gotta get on board. So in a way, like we were seeing, you know, like hippies, those crazy hippies, you know, with these grandiose ideas. We're never gonna let this never gonna happen. But now it's like, oh, I gotta talk to the hippies, and you know, I look at Hawaiians. Like, I'm on Instagram and I see everybody growing kalo and growing their own gardens. It's very reminiscent of the Great Depression and everybody doing victory gardens. So I think it's just in people's consciousness now that they gotta grow their own food. They cannot rely on government. You know, we gotta change. So I think this has been a good catalyst for all of us to respond if we haven't already been thinking in this way. So I think it's actually gonna be easier. Like, while everybody's laying off people, we're hiring people because they're just throwing money at us. Because they know government can't respond timely and adequately. So more and more nonprofits are being called to resolve this issue. And we are on the pulse of our own community. So yeah, I think I'm seeing this shift. And as you know, it's kind of like a snowball effect. As you begin to succeed and people see from your actions and the fruits of your labor that you're doing good, then they want to jump on a bandwagon. And for us, like, we had like our first grant was like 7,000, you know, and it was just doing a lot of volunteer work, and it was very hard and arduous and taxing on our very small staff. And now everybody wants to work with us. Everybody wants, you know, once you get that proven track record, then you start that snowballing. So I always say, no scared, start small. And then after a while, you build that momentum if you have that integrity and you always have that in mind to mālama your community. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Malia. Just a really big mahalo for your presentation. That was great. And you can look in the chat. You've got lots of, you know, this is really inspiring. This is what we need. You know, mobilizing the schools. So yeah, anyways, thank you so much. I think this was a really good presentation. I want to just announce that we'll actually be taking a break for 2 weeks. So we thought we would take a break until November 18. Next week break is inspired by just feeling people will probably want to be glued to the elections outcomes. So not wanting to compete with that. And then November 18, we'll reconvene. We have Tale Mangione from Australian National University, who's going to be talking about nuclear-free and independent Pacific. So with that, I'd like to just, you know, thank James and Aida, as always, for doing such a great job behind the scenes, and Tarcisius for being my co-organizer with the Center for Pacific Island Studies. And again, mahalo to you, Malia.
Mahalo for inviting me. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha, everyone. Take care. Bye.